CEO of NextGen Solar. I'm standing here today through the brilliance of this gentleman, Dr. Richard Brodsman. Richard was the CTO and VP of R&D for Nanophase Technologies, which was an early pioneer in understanding nanomaterials and commercializing them. He has a very noble background, in fact, two noble backgrounds. One, he studied under Nobel laureate Dr. Paul Flory, who was a pioneer in understanding polymers and how they work in solution. Secondly, he worked with Dr. Richard Feynman, who actually coined the term nanotechnology. And nanotechnology, as we all know, is all about how you take bulk materials, reduce them down to the nanometer scale, and have those materials exhibit brand new properties that affect performance and cost. Richard left Nanophase and he started to think about what's an ideal solar technology. He looked at today's situation where you could have high efficiency, in this case about 37% solar capture efficiency, but at very high cost. Or you could have low cost solar, in this case 2 to 4% efficiency, but at low efficiency. So he started to look at it more deeper and said, okay, in solar today you have expensive materials such as silicon. This is a silicon ingot. And that price rose so dramatically in 2008 that it led many thin film startups to begin based on such things as rare earth elements like indium or toxic materials such as cadmium. And all these materials are expensive, involving clean rooms, 1,000 degrees centigrade temperatures, vacuum, and the like. What could be different with the application of nanomaterials? One is you can make these materials highly conductive and apply them in solution so that your costs go down. Secondly, you could use low-cost, earth-abundant elements rather than toxic, rare earth elements. And three, you could use high-speed manufacturing processes such as roll-to-roll. So what he did is he turned to Len Batterson. Len is a longtime Chicago venture capitalist of note, was an early seed investor in all things such as AOL in the early days, all the way up to today's CleverSafe. And Len was, at the time of Richard being there, was the chairman of Nanophase Technologies. So Len listened to the story, loved it, and knowing of Richard's technical prowess, immediately founded the company and provided an initial funding for it. I got involved after I left Firefly Energy. I've been a long-term entrepreneur at companies such as Motorola. I left '98 and went to Silicon Valley, and this is now my fourth startup. In fact, when Richard got his badge today, he's from Argonne, it said entrepreneur on it, so he tore it out and I probably put it on mine. I just need 2 more, and that would be 4. So, at Firefly Energy, we had a great run there, pioneering technology in terms of batteries. We raised $33 million in private equity from some of the world's leading venture capitalists in clean tech. We got $15 million in non-dilutive government funding. We were right on the cusp of moving to manufacturing in our Series D round, which we started in August '08, and then September '08 hit, and we all know how that story turned out for many companies. So I've been looking for what's a new discontinuity in terms of clean technology. Len and I were introduced. I listened to the concept, I liked it, but I did 2 months of my own technical and market due diligence. In October of this year, I voted with 2 feet and joined as CEO. There are 2 challenges today in solar. One is, what's the potential capture efficiency of a particular solar technology in terms of its percentages? And 2, what does it cost per watt in capturing that energy from a solar panel? Those are the 2 metrics of consideration. If you look at today's China Inc. silicon cells have about a 20% efficiency, and what you see in those multiple colors are all those components of a solar cell that comprise its cost. Well above where grid parity is, 8 to 12 cents a kilowatt hour, so that's why subsidies are needed. Thin film, ostensibly being lower cost, actually ends up, because of its lower efficiency, being similar in terms of its delivered cost. Where we're aiming at with the NextGen Solar technology is to get to grid parity with a combination of low-cost materials, simple, cheap manufacturing methods, and high efficiencies wrought by these nano composite materials. If you look at how a traditional solar cell works, you have photons entering in this panel, you have an N-type semiconductor, a P-type semiconductor on the bottom, and then where all that meets is in the middle with this positive and negative junction called a p-n junction. So when a photon comes in, it creates an electron-hole pair, and that electron-hole pair has to reach this positive-negative junction. If it doesn't reach it, then that energy is wasted as heat. And in a silicon-type cell, you can consider this like a cobblestone road. It's very difficult for that to reach the positive-negative junction. What I'm going to show you is a 8-lane superhighway with the NextGen technology, which is seen here. Not typical thin film, it's an actual 3-dimensional thin film. You have a huge surface area gain by the use of these nanocomposite materials. It's based on thin film, so it's less expensive. It uses inorganic and organic semiconductors. And in the world of photovoltaic cells, you can have an organic cell, you can have an inorganic cell. This marries the best elements of both. It uses earth-abundant materials rather than rare earth elements. Made at ordinary temperatures and pressures, not 1,000-degree centigrade, as in cadmium telluride. Doesn't involve clean rooms and involves simple high-volume manufacturing. So really high efficiency and all those factors in terms of contributions to low cost. It looks like a thin film solar cell, but the business end of that is in the middle, this novel solar absorbing material. How does it work? The positive electrode is on the top, the negative on the bottom, and what you see in the middle is that conductive inorganic semiconductor. You can consider that as a sponge. And the light blue is the polymer material, the organic semiconductor, and you can consider that the liquid. Everywhere that light blue touches the dark blue is the positive and negative junction. So when a photon comes in, it's easy for that whole pair to find its way to the respective electrode. The electron through that superhighway, the whole pair through the polymer material, and when it hits the respective electrode, now you produce a current. How does it work? I'll show you this brief video. This is from Dr. Brotzman's labs at Argonne National Labs. He's using an eyedropper to put the conductive nanoparticles on top of the thin film. He flips a button. Again, no clean rooms involved in this. And he spreads the material onto the thin film. He put it in an oven at 40 degrees centigrade for a minute. And out comes these materials that have cells assembled onto that thin film. And now he's confirming the electrical conductivity. I guess you have to look at the solar cell in a different way because it didn't make it the right side on this presentation. I apologize. So, you know, a lot of technology startups, they'll say, hey, we declared victory, we have this new performance level. But when you do a little deeper digging, you find that the data that was based on was done in a postage stamp sized cell. Instead, Richard was always doing development at 8.5, 11 sizes. And in fact, he scaled this up all the way to 4 feet. And there's no change in the performance, so the degradation does not exist. So those two factors I mentioned, efficiency and cost. Here's what the efficiency picture looks like. The Gen 1 solar cells have about 20% solar capture efficiency. The thin film Gen 2 just slightly north of 10. The organic photovoltaic cells 2 to 4%, depending on if you're talking about lab or commercial. These are all commercial values I've listed here. Our aim for the first product is 25% solar capture efficiency. The other factor is cost. This was a study that was just done by Lux Research that looks at these major technologies and from a cost of goods basis on dollars per watt, what's the declines expected. So silicon's up here. Here's where First Solar is expected to be north of 50 cents by 2015. And here's where we're aiming for, 30 cents a watt in our module by 2015. Of course, this forecast doesn't take into account what this breakthrough would represent. It would just unlock the market potential because now you've hit grid parity. But this expects, even without considering this kind of technology, a very robust growth rate of about 24% a year. The grid-tied versus not grid-tied segments. Grid-tied is about 60% of the overall solar market, and of that, these are the major segments of the market. We're going after the commercial and the residential applications because if we could deliver that kind of efficiency level, it plays really well to space-constrained areas such as rooftops of commercial buildings as well as on homes. And so we're expecting revenue of $43 million to start in 2013, all the way rising to $233 million. As far as our business model, the value chain, we're going to be building modules. We'll source materials and equipment and partner on balance of systems and on installations. As an investor, you have to look at what are the ways, if I invest, you're going to go about lowering risk. So there's a number of factors at play in terms of how do you get to market, is your IP proven and protectable, how are you going to scale up? That's a huge issue for investing in a new solar company because the big downstroke comes in Series C when you have to scale it up. And a lot of these solar technologies are very expensive to scale up. How are you building awareness of your solution and what are the paths to funding? Let's look at all those. We already had discussions underway with the top management at Apogee. If you look out the window from the Bleacher Center, you see this beautiful building called Trump Tower. They've installed all this commercial building glass, so we're in discussions with them on use of that in building integrated photovoltaics. Tecna America is one of the largest commercial deployers of roofing systems. In fact, they established a solar division 2 years ago that's already doing $30 million in sales. They're going to be testing our system at their test facility. And then I brought in the technical editor of Global Solar magazine under non-disclosure. He loves this technology. Can't wait to tell us what he hears all about it when we lift the embargo. Our IP position, the company owns the foundational IP. We have patents underway. We have an agreement with Argonne and improvements. I'll talk about Argonne in a second. And additional disclosure underway. And because of this being an inorganic photovoltaic cell, it's a new white space opportunity for us to build a big patent estate around. We have a cooperative research and development agreement with Argonne to the tune of $500,000. We're leveraging multi-millions of dollars worth of equipment and expert personnel, so it's a very capital efficient model to date. As far as investors, we have leading execs from the area as personal investors. We initially raised $680,000, and I'm happy to report that last week we ended up with an additional amount that totals $1 million. It's a fertile space for government funding. In fact, one of the President's key nanotechnology initiatives is involving solar energy collection. And in fact, Tom Khalil, who keynoted and said in his keynote, one of our big priorities is solar as cheap as paint. When he got off that lecture, I showed him those 4 videos that I showed you. He said, I need to know more about this technology. And I was in DC last week briefing his staff. We haven't really talked about much of what we're doing. I can't even give you a NextGen Solar business card, and we've got a placeholder website because all our money's going into the technology, but even so, some word has gotten out about us, and so we're getting some good press. Thank you very much for your time.